Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. This is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and my show today is a special episode about autism. My guests today are Joell Dunlap and Gib Papazian. Joell is the founder of the Square Peg Foundation and the executive director of Square Peg Ranch in Half Moon Bay. Joell has taught people in North America, in Europe, and in Asia how to incorporate horses as partners to serve the autism families in their community. The foundation, along with the ranch, lean into families that have nowhere else to go and give them hope while building a network of friends that is supportive and healthy. The foundation's mission is simple. We turn I wish into we can. My other guest, Gib Papazian, is a longtime and well-known Hillsborough resident and the owner of Lucky Strike Farms, headquartered in Burlingame. Gib was a guest of mine on the show a year ago and has a passion for helping special needs children and adults. After our show, Gib suggested that we do an episode on autism. His son Nick was diagnosed with autism at the age of 4. Gib met Joell through a workability program several years ago at the Square Peg Ranch, where his son Nick currently works 5 days a week. And now my conversation with Joell Dunlap and Gib Papazian. Joell and Gib, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Mark.
Well, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. We had talked about this show for quite a while. We met earlier in the summer, and anyway, delays, but here we are today, right? Okay, guys. I mentioned in the intro that this was going to be a show about autism. So I thought, because I don't know much about autism, I just went to the dictionary and pulled out the definition of autism, and then maybe you guys can give me a little bit of feedback on what your definition of autism is. So, autism or autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is a neurodevelopment condition that affects how a person perceives the world, processes information, and interacts with others. It is called spectrum because it presents a wide range of symptoms and levels of impairment or ability. Now, I probably read that thing 10 times. I'm still not sure quite what it means. So can you guys help me a little bit with that or help our listeners?
I'll have a go if that's all right.
Thank you.
The most succinct way to describe autism that I've found so far is to think about the word itself, right? Autism. Auto is the self. Automobile is something that moves itself. Automatic moves itself. Autism then is locked within the self, right? It's really the definition of loneliness. It's important to know that it's still a subjective diagnosis. We don't have a biological marker, so we can't take a blood test or a spit test and say, you have autism and Gib doesn't. It doesn't work that way yet. We're getting closer to a biological marker, but at this point, it's still a subjective diagnosis that comes from a psychologist, sometimes a pediatrician. But the way that I think encompasses the spectrum is to think about locked within the self, autism. And that would describe the social problems, the anxiety that creates some of the repetitive spinning and flapping that you see in kind of classic autism ways of showing. I think that's about as close as I can get. How about you, Gib?
Gib?
Well, I think that, if we really come down to it, autism, it's how symptoms present. A psychiatrist would tell you that. And I think part of it is just the key thing is probably executive function. And what I mean by that is the way that you order the world. You're driving a car. Here's a stop sign. There's a pedestrian. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to turn right. You're ordering the world in your head, right? And it has to do with self-regulation. And these are executive functions that you just do without even thinking about it. But with autistic people, for instance, and it goes from nonverbal and self-injurious to you can hardly tell that there's anything wrong, except that they're kind of in the tunnel a little bit, like somebody like me who has very high functioning Asperger's. So what ends up happening is that the person doesn't move through the world seamlessly like you do, Mark, for instance. And what ends up happening is that she's right. They become singular and in and with themselves. They don't. You know how you can read your wife's mind, right? I can read my wife's mind, right? You just know. Everybody has a theory of the mind. They are literally like monoliths in and of themselves, which is why socialization is so difficult for them, because you have two monoliths that have a hard time talking to each other. So they tend to do things in parallel. And if they seem to have the same perseverative interest, I'm interested in speaking of, that's my son calling me. I'm going to shut my thing off here. Yeah. Speaking of the young man, yeah. So they to make a long story short, it's just a method with which they order the world and make sense of it, and it doesn't, because everything's coming at them at once.
Yeah. You mentioned a word in there, and for myself and the listeners, Asperger's. What did you call yourself? You have a form of autism?
I was yes, absolutely. I was diagnosed.
What's it called?
Asperger's.
And why is it called that?
It's just a fancy way of saying autism light.
Okay, autism light.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
All right.
That's just, and these people, they all get together and say this person has autism, this person has Asperger's. It's all the same thing. They call it autism spectrum disorder.
Okay.
And does it start? It's like the tunnel, right? The deeper you are in the tunnel, the smaller the outside world looks. The closer you are to the edge of the tunnel, the bigger the outside world works. But you're still living. I live in a slightly different reality than you do.
Yeah.
Right? Not much, but a little bit.
Okay.
And it makes people either not so much socially awkward, but in some ways, kind of different, a different kind of duck. Silicon Valley is run by people with Asperger's.
Joell, because you work with autistic children, if I brought 3 children in here and only one of them had autism, but stood them right up here in this room, would you be able to tell which one was autistic? Is it real noticeable, or?
Yes.
You could
That's
tell.
the short answer.
Would they have to
yeah.
speak? Would they have to say anything? Or is it just mannerisms or characteristics or anything like that?
There's a walk we call the autism walk. People with autism tend to spend a lot of time on their toes. They don't have a big heel strike. There is very often a presentation of probably the easiest way to describe it would be nervous behavior, but it is a spectrum. So autism it's a bad bucket of a lot of different manifestations. Like Gib was saying, you have people who never acquire language, and then you have people who acquired language and hit all of their biological markers up until somewhere between 18 months and 3 years, and then regressed in their language development and their social development. Why we're still calling both of those things, both of them autism, I think will change very, very soon. But there certainly are characteristics, and my husband always giggles that every time we sit in a restaurant, I look over and there's a kid wearing Crocs and eating French fries, which are two things that families who understand what autism is to say, well, there's my people.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. You go along with that thought?
Yeah, a lot of them have what we call tactile defensiveness. I had to cut all the tags off of my son's shirts because little things drive them completely crazy, and it does, and it's different with all of them. Like some will only eat these kinds of foods, and they become focused just on that. But she's right; you can spot one. You can spot one pretty quickly. Now, there's ones that are way further up the spectrum, and you got to talk to them for a few minutes to really understand. They don't tend to follow conversations very well.
Uh-huh.
They will just kind of vector off, and a lot of that just has to do with the executive function, that they're living in their own little monolithic little box, right?
Yeah.
And they're struggling to understand the outside world, which is why they play in parallel a lot. You can tell little kids, you can tell the autistic kid in 2 seconds if you see a bunch of little kids because there's the ones that are playing together and there's the ones that are just standing off to the side or just doing something in parallel with the other ones. And that was some of the notice with me. Nick has a twin sister who, strangely enough, is like, her nickname is Princess Smarty Pants. She's like this genius kid, right? So the disparity. Mm-hmm. So when they were getting older, right, and then you start to see the divergence between the benchmarks that she was hitting, which were early, and Nick benchmarks that just wasn't hitting them. So by the time, they were 2.5 years old, I'm just going, hey, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture, right? Because and it made it even worse because my daughter's gifted, so it really was strange, So
okay. I'm going to share a stat with you. I just have one stat, all right, but it kind of stood out, and actually I didn't know if it was a good one or a bad one. It says apparently 1 in 31 children, 1 out of every 31 children, are diagnosed with autism. Are either one of you familiar with that statistic? Have you heard of that statistic? Is that a good or a bad thing? I mean, how do you measure that? Are things getting better or are things getting worse?
Well, we're massively aware of it, and I think Gib, when Nick was diagnosed, that number was probably closer to 1 in 400 and change.
So we're getting more cases?
We're getting more cases. And this subject comes up every single autism discussion that we have. And the reality is there are some really smart people working on the genetics and the epigenetics. They're working on whether or not this is an epigenetic trigger that's turned on by environmental forces that we're seeing more of, whether this is happening in utero. We're also finally doing a better job of diagnosing girls. It used to be you would get 1 girl diagnosed with autism for every 5 boys. And it turns out girls are better at masking. And so they weren't getting diagnosed as regularly. We still think that there is a component related to gender. We also see gender dysmorphia 5 times more often in the autism community.
Whoa, wait a minute. Gender dysphoria?
Dysmorphia.
Dysmorphia.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Or it means people who are struggling with the gender that was assigned to them at birth, whether that's questioning or whether it's an outright, this is completely the wrong body that I'm in. But that comes up, has always come up in human populations at some level. Comes up about 5 times more often in the autism community.
The strange thing is that the strange thing is that at least from, I've been, at this for years and years, I also find that a lot of autistic depends on their level of functionality, where they are on the spectrum. But there's a certain tipping point where they simply are not interested in any kind of opposite sex interaction. In other words, they don't have a sexual desire. They become, basically sexless creatures, and they're interested in everything else sort of but that. And so they don't tend to procreate.
Yeah.
But yet the percentages, they've kind of leveled off now, but it was 1 in 400 something. Then it was about 101 out of 100 every 167, I think, around 15, 20 years ago. And now we're getting better at diagnosing it. Joell is 100% right. We are 1 in 32, and there's going to be a bunch of those that are, like when I was on all the special ed boards around here, you have a certain percentage that are just really in trouble, and then you have a certain ones that you're going to be able to function in society with some learning, right? But as it stands right now, the ones of very severe cases has leveled off, but it's still severe cases is probably about 1 in 100 right now. And by 100, I mean they will not be able ever to live independently without being in a group home or some supervision or being prompted or, because it just what ends up happening is they just never develop the functionality, the executive function to be able to go to the store and pay for something and pay their rent and put on their clothes and all these. They can do the rudimentary things by rote, but they can't function on anything more than sort of a rudimentary level. Like my son, who was absolutely non-functional. So, which thanks to the Sunrise program, we were able to get him to where he is now. But he started out at zero,
Yeah.
zero, or whatever one more than
Yeah.
zero is.
And we'll talk about some of those programs in a moment. I'd like to go back to Joell for a moment and talk a little bit about the Square Peg Foundation and the Square Peg Ranch. So what inspired you to sort of start this Square Peg Foundation? It was back in 2004, right? Was that the year?
Back in 2004,
What was the motivation?
midlife crisis.
Seriously? I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh at that or not, but
I think, right, midlife crisis is when you look at your life and say, what the heck am I doing? And the one thing that I knew, the one thing that I was confident in was my horsemanship skills, but who the heck cares about horsemanship skills? So I thought, well, surely my path is to do something good with the horses. And I thought that meant that I was meant to start a therapeutic riding program, which is what a lot of people do. But a deep dive into that showed me that I wasn't interested in being a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. And I really felt like if it was physical therapy you were after, there's probably a cleaner, a safer, and a cheaper way to do it. So I was pretty lost because that wasn't my path. And autism found us. And again, at the time, that diagnosis rate was, a lot closer to 1.5%. Now we're over 3%, but it was such an underserved population. I myself was a 16-year-old mom, and it was lonely, and the loneliness was the crushing part. What I saw in autism families was that same loneliness, and I knew what that felt like, and I thought, there's something I can address. There's
Right.
something I can do something about. So that was really the inspiration.
and you mentioned it. Autism found you. You said us. That would be you and your husband.
Me and my husband, me and the program, me and the
Yeah,
horses.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And how did you end up at the Square Peg Ranch in Half Moon Bay?
So we started Square Peg in 2004, which everybody, having a startup was the sexy thing.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of good advisors, really good advisors. And our first idea at the time, Golden Gate Park Stables was closing. The operator simply couldn't afford to continue to keep up, and the parks said, "We can't keep this place open. It's an eyesore. It's a problem." The operator had walked away, and a bunch of people came to us and said, "Your program needs to be in Golden Gate Park in the middle of San Francisco," which sounded really sexy. And so we stayed up late nights and we made charts and graphs, and then ultimately decided that there wasn't any privacy in the park, and the people we were serving needed privacy.
Right.
They didn't need to ride horses in a fishbowl. And so we looked at the Presidio stables. At the time, the federal government had put out an RFP for the old cavalry stables in the Presidio. And that was a $4 million renovation project on buildings we would never own, and our landlord would be the federal government. And the irony, of course, is now we're in the national park, so our landlord is the federal government.
Right.
But,
with a very long lease, I guess.
No, that's a whole other podcast,
Okay,
Mark. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Although things are quite quiet, national parks are trying to fly under the radar right now, budget-wise. So we've had a little more freedom than we had in the past.
How long have you been at the ranch?
We have been in the Rancho Corral del Tierra, which is part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, now for 2.5 years. And it's a beautiful spot. Putting people who struggle with supreme anxiety in a place of natural beauty and movement turns out to be about 80% of the work.
Yeah. You take on not just autistic folks, right? Other things going on too, correct?
We are the right now the only provider of equine-related services for San Mateo County mental health and behavioral health. But you'll find that the anxiety, the repetitive behaviors, the social isolation that come up in trauma are very similar to autism as far as the things that alleviate those most pressing issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple more questions for you, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Where did the name Square Peg come from? I'm sure you're asked that all the time,
All
but
the time. We knew we were on to something about creating an environment that is joyful, that is private, and we didn't want to restrict it just to horses. We wanted to be able to eventually move into other creative arts, whether that's filmmaking or theater or dance or music. And if you think about a square peg, being forced into a round hole, it's not just that the pounding is such hard work, it's that you tear up the peg doing it.
right.
And that really worked for us to say, if you continue to pound a square peg into a round hole, it's just futile and it's brutal. So maybe you just adjust the hole.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. When I visited your ranch earlier in the summer, Gib took me out there. The horses are beautiful. Where do they come from?
They come from the racetrack, which means the equine world thinks I'm crazy.
Really?
Yeah.
So are they like rescue horses, like rescue dogs? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you say they came from the races, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of done then.
Rescue is a loaded word.
Okay.
And I'm glad you brought it up. We work with the racetracks. We were one of the first programs fully accredited by the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, which is a Northern America accreditation program that really shows that we have the skills, we have the facilities, and we have the accountability to truly take care of a large, sensitive, reactive breed.
Yeah.
And then we work closely with the track. California has a groundbreaking program where they have a charity that takes the horses from the track, either post-injury or hopefully before that last race. As we say, a horse that isn't performing well, they might engage the trainer and say, this horse really isn't going to make it as a racehorse. Maybe you should let us help find him another home. Our horses are the square pegs, the really beautiful, perfect ones that are nice movers. Hopefully find a home with a little girl that wants to, go to horse shows. Most of ours have injuries that are going to require care over their lifetime, maybe some special shoeing, some medication, training. And we find that people connect to the stories of the horses in a really deep way as they process their own story. So here's a horse that, for instance, the most recent one we brought in sold as a yearling. So he was a 1-year-old horse for $914,000.
Oh my gosh.
And he was donated to our program 2.5 months ago.
Amazing. I can't wait to
So,
see him.
He's really cool,
Yeah.
really cool. So, after a couple of bad races, his value plummeted
Right.
at the racetrack. However, his value at the ranch
Can't put a price tag on it,
is
right?
priceless. Yeah.
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 I just think that when you look at these beautiful horses, you know that you're not looking at a regular type horse. They just look stout. They just look amazing, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, they look like they're in charge.
We're very proud of that.
Thanks, Joell. I'm going to come back to you in a few minutes. Gib, your turn. Okay. I just like to know, your personal connection to autism is obviously your son, Nick, right? I mentioned in the beginning that he was diagnosed at 4 years old. Is that correct?
He was formally diagnosed at 4 years old.
When did you realize it? When did you and your wife think, oh, something's different? I mean, how old was he then? 2 or 3? 1, 2 or 3?
Well, it's usually, historic. If you look at 100 families, it's usually, particularly with the boy particularly, the dad is usually the last one to admit, hey, there's something wrong with Junior, right?
Yeah.
the therapists and the doctors said that we were this bizarre, backwards thing, because I knew at 2.5, because I'm looking at my daughter, who is bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. She's full of the devil.
Right.
Right. And Nick is just kind of the four things that we teach in the autism treatment program modality that we became experts in. The first thing is eye contact. Right. Autistic people don't look into your eyes when they're talking to you easily. It's hard, it's painful for them. So there's eye contact, physical contact. Some don't like to be touched, right? The other thing is teaching loops of communication. I say something to you, you say something to me. That's how conversation happens. But in order for those to happen, there's attention span right there. And those are the four building blocks of socialization. And I figured out at 2.5, my little chatterbox is why, till you're ready to pull your hair out, right? Nick, never. They don't use pronouns. They don't ask why questions. And I knew. And Nick's mother was, honestly, she's a lovely person. But, she had the vision, was white picket fence, golden retriever, perfect little house, perfect little kids, right? Why the hell she married me? Who knows? You wanted to have kids with him, really?
Okay.
Yeah, okay, right. But yeah, I finally insisted, hey, there's some, because the benchmarks by the age of 4 were the disparity between the two of them. Because I've got one who is here and one who's there. It's not like the kid down the street. We both have 4-year-olds. I'm watching it in real time.
Right.
So we took them to the Children's Health Council.
Well, let me just ask you something. Along the way, you're taking your child to a pediatrician, right, for shots or whatever, or checkups, and the doctor didn't notice anything along the way, or did he give you an inkling?
The pediatrician was, sometimes this is the baloney of the year, but this was all the old saws. Well, boys take longer to develop, so sometimes you just have to wait. The problem is you wait until till you're at a critical stage, right? Because nobody wants to say your kid is X. No doctor wants to say, hey, look, your son's never going to be okay, homie. Right. So that's really, there were some questions, but when I finally put my foot down and said, look, there's something wrong here, right?
Right.
And Nick's mother went along with it. She said, yeah, there must be, because her sister's popping out kids as fast as she can there, and there's a disparity, there's a real-time disparity going on there too when all the cousins are together, right? Yeah. So we took them to the Children's Health Council down at Stanford, and they're like, well, sure enough.
Who told you to go there? Did the pediatrician, or did you just kind of look it up?
No, Nick's mother started the parents one was a psychologist and one was a doctor, and so that seemed like the logical, because I know nothing at this point right now. Right. At that point I'm like a neophyte. I'm just like in a blindfold, just feeling my way around in a dark room. So they went there and they said, yeah, your son definitely has autism, and they brought in a rather famous doctor who came in and he used the R word. Your son is retarded, essentially.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Instead of saying we think he might have autistic characteristics.
No, he says your son has autism, and it's a form of retardation.
Wow, how'd that hit you?
I already knew.
Yeah, but still there had to be a reaction.
Knew. I was not. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true. I was not the slightest bit surprised or freaked out.
Okay, so then did you say to him, what do we do now? What happens?
Well, of course I did.
Yeah.
Right? And the Children's Health Council said, I've got an idea, this Russian woman, we're going to medicate him. Because he was hyperactive, hand flapping, just imagine an out-of-control pinball. That's what we had at 4.5 or 5 years old.
And what year was this going back? I don't know, the 80s or something?
97.
Okay.
No, they were born in 98. I'm sorry, 2003.
So was that pretty standard practice then? He's got autism, but he's retarded, and we're going to medicate. Is that was happening?
They were at the time. They were still fishing around trying to figure out literally what to do. How do we treat this? Right. And they still don't really know how to treat it. So they came up with ABA, which is behavior modification. That was, of course, in those days, the school districts were pre-programmed to run everybody through the ABA. like the ABA conveyor belt. And it's just a form we were discussing in the last podcast. It's a form of objectifying a child. How are you today? I'm fine. Here's a cookie. Now, when the cookies stop working, now you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You got to figure out what the currency is. So it's basically just training an animal, pure objectification. It's teaching appropriate communication, not meaningful communication.
All right.
So that's how we ended up taking the path
right.
we did.
I got a little bit more for you. And Joell, please feel free to chime in on anything, anytime, okay? So Nick is a grown man now. He's what, around 28 years old?
27.
27.
And a half.
Let's go back to his childhood for a moment. What was a typical day like when he was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10? I mean, was it a lot of stress on you guys? And
Well, when the kids were 4 and a half, Nick's mother left me. So now I'm a single dad.
Were you splitting time with your wife?
Yes, we were.
Well,
But
that'd
it
be
was. But the
difficult.
problem is that Nick's now stepmother has a doctorate in education, and we sat there after a year or so, and we'd known each other since we were little kids. We're scratching our head, and we're like, this ABA thing is not working because the objectification doesn't work. You basically, if you're trying to get to A, B, C, D, E, nothing is faster than behavior modification. You're training an animal. Hey, doggy, fetch, sit up, stand, whatever it is, whatever the currency is to get them to do what you want. But to get past D or E is 1,000 times more work. And if you start out with ABA, and we are proponents of the relationship program, which is sunrise or floor time. There's all kinds of variations of it now, years later. So it was you had one household believed in ABA because Nick's mother took classes from Ivar Lobos at himself, the father of this at UCLA, right? And then you got the film school ex-husband here, who is now has been convinced and has been going back to Massachusetts, taking all these classes on relationship therapies. So it's a completely different modality, honestly.
Where was Nick going to school at this time? I mean, you were a resident of Hillsborough. Was he at Crocker? I mean, at North or South or any of those?
He was there, the special education program at the time. Burlingame had one and Hillsborough had one.
Uh-huh.
And they eventually merged together. But the first year he was in with the county program. The county have their own classrooms. Right, and then he went into special education program in the Burlingame district. Hillsborough only had like 3 kids that were being publicly educated in the special needs milieu, right? Lack of a better term. So second grade, he was in the county program, but they rented a room from McKinley School. And then by third grade, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we found a landing spot at Roosevelt School in Burlingame with the teacher, Jen Cole, who just did a wonderful job. So Nick had the continuity of having 3 years of a really well-trained special education teacher who was not a ABA proponent, but one who was just trying to play to the strengths of every kid.
How many other kids were in the class with him at that time, give or take?
12.
And would they be able to interact with each other, or were they just like in their own world?
On a very rudimentary level.
Yeah.
There were some that were just chatterboxes that were 2 chatterboxes chattering at each other, but for the most part, to the extent that they could interact like you and I interact.
Okay, so there wasn't a lot of interaction for Nick in the classroom.
Well, Jen, the teacher at the time, was really good at stimulating the kids to interact with each other. Lots of group things, and sometimes they're doing a group thing in parallel, but at least they're doing it with them, which is the first steps of going in there. They're not all completely monolithic, but for the most part, though, most of the kids are kind of in their own little world, and drawing them out takes, it's exhausting. Special needs teachers, special education teachers are doing the Lord's work. You got no idea how tired they are at the end of the day. 'Cause it's not like having a bunch of little brats in your 2nd or 3rd grade class. Mm-hmm. These are kids, and each individual one of those kids is a completely different thing than any other kid in there. It's basically like having God's odds and ends drawer dumped on your desk, now try to make sense of it as a special ed. And that's why by June, she was like ready to collapse. It was, and we gave a lot of parental support, but it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. Now wait till junior, and then when they get to junior high, then now all of a sudden now you got the hormones problem, right? And the autistic girls are they're the biggest challenge generally at middle school. But you still have the hormone problem, which causes a lot of exacerbates a lot of behavior issues. So it gets pretty hairy. Don't let anybody lie to you. It's rough. And then of course you have a spectrum in the class. They're not all apples and oranges. You're taking apple, oranges, grapes, and grapefruit, and you're dumping them all in one class, and then telling the teacher, "Hey, try to make sense of this." I mean, it's wild that they're able to even do it, honestly. Which is why we give them so much help. And we had,
Sure. Joell, now that Nick is 27 years old, what's a typical day like him for at the ranch? Is he pretty much to himself, or does he engage with the other workers there? Or how does all that work? Do you give him an assignment and he just does it?
So Nick comes in. His bus usually gets him there about somewhere between 9:15 and 9:45. His shift starts at 10, and he likes to have a little transition time. Transitions are very typically the toughest parts where you see behaviors come up. And Nick is really good with the transition to work. So he knows he has to clock in on the time clock at 10, and he has special permission to come in our office and sit and have his quiet time. And sometimes a snack will help too. And the quality of his night's sleep, and the quality of the driver when he gets there just by his body language. And he has a very unique way of communicating with each one of the staff. For instance, I think, and tell me if I'm right here, Gib, I think I resemble or sound like his Aunt Lydia a little bit.
Yeah, you look quite a bit like her, yeah.
And his Aunt Lydia does management videos, and he has a few management videos of hers that he watches, and they remind him of me. And so I have had to learn the script of his favorite Aunt Lydia management video, which is about whether or not you as a manager should serve a shit sandwich.
Okay.
And
yeah.
we've been doing this back and forth for quite some time, and I've learned that Nick brings up the shit sandwich video when I'm being too nice. He's waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's
Right.
his code way of saying, "Give it to me straight, Joell." And there are songs that he likes to sing back and forth that he'll engage. And right now we've been talking a lot about Baby Einstein and Baby Bach. And so he has a somewhat cryptic way of communicating, but it's a great puzzle, and he's delighted when you figure it out. And he's delighted when you ask cogent questions that are age appropriate. So you would think, okay, we're talking about Baby Bach, maybe he needs something very soothing, la 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 la. And he was worried about whether or not he was watching something over and over too many times, and whether or not that was a problem.
When you say he was worried, does he tell you that, or how do you know that?
His body language is very clear.
Really?
And when he's agitated, you know it.
Yeah.
And he speaks with his body quite a bit, but he also has such an engaging way of, he has a deep relationship, very different relationship with each staff. So he has significant support needs, no doubt about it. He also has a very sophisticated way of engaging with people. There is one guy that rides on the bus with him that can be quite repetitive about things, and frankly, it'll tick Nick off sometimes. Mm-hmm. And he'll often try and show us, hey, I need some room away from that person. So yeah, Nick he's fascinating, he's kind, he's thoughtful, he's funny, and we're learning so much about his artistic sense lately. His penmanship is not something that can be taught. He's not mimicking anybody's penmanship. and I don't know how to describe it, but the way he letters things
Is it legible?
It's very legible,
Oh, okay.
and it's artistic. It's thoughtful.
Yeah.
He plans the space. He plans how to communicate meaning in different words. But you got to be paying attention.
He has a journal he keeps.
That's great.
He's got this left-handed printing that he does, but if you want to know what's going on in his head, you just read the journal, which
Yeah.
is, and some of these, and he's right, some of these perseverative
Left-handed
behaviors.
printing, is that what you said, though?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And he keeps it in his journal.
Yeah, and he keeps it in his journal, and it's basically just it's just like a running core dump of everything that's going through his head. It's really the journal's purpose I have seen over the years, and we didn't tell him, hey, start keeping a journal.
Yeah.
Nah, not like girl takes a diary. No, it's just a daily running commentary on all the stuff that's going on in his head. And you have to remember that he carries around, like a lot of autistic people, he carries around a lot of anxiety. And, well, let's try this anti-anxiety medication. Well, that works great for 3 weeks, and then it stops working. Well, let's up the dose after 2 months. I mean, so many of my friends, I know a lot of autism dads, and we're all friends all over the country, and everybody goes through the same, gets run down the same conveyor belt.
Yeah.
Try this, try that. Oh, that worked great. Okay, it's not working. Oh, let's up it again. Let's up it again a third time. Oh, terrible kickback effect. Let's try this other medication. The moral of the story is none of it works long term. So you have to go to the root of the problem, which is alleviating the anxiety. When she says sometimes you just need, when he comes home, he goes out on his trampoline and he just lies there and he stares at God. And just don't bug him for 45 minutes. When he's ready to get up and interact, he will, because he just needs to the transition, he just needs to reorder the world to the new reality right now. Even if it's a familiar reality, he's going from horsey land and Joell to a rattly bus, ready coast, clunk, 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 clunk. Then you're out, he's all covered with mud, this and that, and he just takes off his boots, and he just needs to commune with very quiet and just watch the clouds for a while, because
Would this
it
be
calms
at
the
your
anxiety.
home? At your home, or is he someplace else?
Well, he lives in my other house around
Right,
the corner.
okay.
I'm in and out of there constantly.
Yeah.
He lives with a guy who I'll just say it. He has Asperger's himself.
Yeah.
And they are very simpatico, brainwave wise. Yeah, but he understands where Nick just needs to be. He needs a lot more decompression, because it goes back to executive function, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It just it takes him longer to reorder his world, right? So I can now go on to the next activity, whatever it is. And that's why you try to keep things as consistent as you can. Autistic people don't deal with curveballs very well, right?
And
Yeah.
near as we can tell, brain-wise, that's exhaustion from the anxiety. So imagine that you were just constantly bombarded with anxiety. You would need that time to lay on the trampoline and stare at God for a
guess
while.
so. Yeah,
And when you view it through a lens, I've had this idea. I haven't told you about this, Gib. I think that we should start calling autism cortisol poisoning. So cortisol is a wonderful hormone that our body produces. It is the stress hormone, but it's the one that enervates you to take action. And it's supposed to be a short-term thing. With someone who is in a constant state of anxiety, that cortisol is pumping through their system constantly. And the exhaustion factor is, we see autism meltdowns, which you hear about in the literature, you hear about it in, movies, where all of a sudden someone just completely flips out. They're screaming, they're crying, they're violent, blah, blah, blah. They're exhausted. They're exhausted. They have no resources left over. But your body produces an antidote to cortisol, and that's a hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin is actually produced in almost every organ of the body. And one of the best ways to get your body to produce oxytocin is regular rhythmic movement, Oxytocin also factors, it enables bonding, which is the conversation loops. And so imagine if the body is constantly bombarded with cortisol, making those conversation loops is next to impossible. And even if you did make that effort, the exhaustion on the other side may create a behavior issue that nobody wants to see. So, and I bang on about this all the time just so that people. We had a parent that was dealing with a child who was completely melting down at the ranch, and
what does a meltdown mean?
A meltdown is it's just an emotional breakdown. It's usually crying, kicking, screaming,
freak out,
spitting. Someone in a panic.
Yeah.
And right, you see toddlers have meltdowns, right? The terrible twos.
Right.
This is different, right? So imagine a terrible two meltdown with someone who weighs 150 pounds, and it goes on for hours.
Oh, it will.
And then there's shame on the other side. We're not talking about people who aren't emotionally intelligent. They know that they've created stress in their family.
How do you control a meltdown at the ranch?
That's, you give people room and space and dignity. And you try and learn how they got there so that you read the signs beforehand. And you can't prevent all of them, but you can create a safe space, and you can create some type of a buffer so that the shame on the other side doesn't feed into a constant cycle where that person is emotionally and physically
This
exhausted.
had to be all new to you, though, back in 2004, right? Because you didn't have a lot of experience with autistic kids, right?
I didn't.
So you kind of been learning this over the year and experiencing these things and going, oh, my God, what do I do now? Or, I mean, did you have those moments?
Well, I'm certainly not reducing people to animals. However, when you're dealing with a 1,200-pound animal with steel shoes on with cleats that bites and kicks and communicates nonverbally, you better start being able to read body language. You better start figuring out what kind of an environment does this animal need so that they don't flip out and hurt people. So I think you see a lot of therapeutic riding programs now working in the autism field, and you realize that good horsemen understand nonverbal communication. They understand creating an environment where somebody can be their best self. They understand de-escalating things so that people don't die. And so good horsemen actually have a pretty good sense of working with someone who's just completely overcome by anxiety.
Yeah, that's very
Mark,
interesting.
every parent has to go through that horrendous learning curve, and it's a horrendous learning curve.
Yeah.
I bet.
One of the things that we find, and I tell parents this all the time, because our house was a revolving door, because Nick went from 0 to where he does. When the school people came to me and said, would you be on this board or that board? Because they just couldn't figure out how we got him from here to there. But part of it is you just have to figure out there's a reset button. Nick's reset button, like when he turns into a whirling dervish, or I can just see him, he's just right on the cusp of having his brains explode. The fastest way, he grew up with dad's a guitar player his whole life. He's grown up singing, and his stepmother is a doctorate in music, so he's grown up with that. So his reset button is whenever he's just really having a tough time, I'll just grab the first guitar I see, and he knows the same 10 or 12, 15 songs, right? And I'll just say, which one do you want to sing? And he will just sit down, and he'll say, I want to do this. It's like having dad's a jukebox. I want to hear this Grateful Dead song. No surprise, right? Whatever. And then I'll just play the first. I'll play the first notes of it and the whole rest of it. And then by the end of the song, it's like rebooting a computer. Does it work all the time? No. Does it work 90% of the time? Yeah, it does. Because every parent, it's a coping mechanism for the parents too, right? It's everybody has to hit the reset button, because as I've told you before, autistic people have supernatural powers. They know what you're thinking. They don't know what you're thinking, like reading minds, like you see in the movies. No, but they feel your chi energy. If you're having a terrible day, if I walk in, I can be as stone-faced and I might have just had just a beauty. And I walk in the door, and it's just like I'm so frustrated I wanted to scream, but I'm just going to snap a smile on my face and, all right,
Yeah.
Nick, let's make dinner together, Hot Rod. He will know instantaneously. You can't tell from the outside, but he feels your energy because they have a sixth sense. They have a third eye. I don't know what you want to call it, but and if there's a button that they can push, particularly when they're younger, a button that they can push to push a parent over the edge. The good button and the bad button, until they get older, are equally tempting to push. And if they're going to get a great reaction, a big reaction by pushing somebody over the edge, Nick's great doing this with his mother. Push that button and just keep pushing that button until blood squirts out of her. Poor woman. I mean, it's terrible sometimes. But after a while, you just have to it's not just slapping a smile on your face and pretending. You have to, deep down in that cobalt rod at the bottom of your stomach, you have to exude calm down from there because they can feel it. You cannot lie to an autistic person. They know. Correct, Joell?
Correct, 100%. And the flip side of that is an honesty coming from them that you may or may not appreciate. And you better grow a thick skin and a good sense of humor because that honesty is
It's coming from them?
They're going
to say something?
Yes, a very
that maybe
direct,
you don't want to
deep
hear
honesty.
or what? Yeah.
Yeah, that layer of social nicety doesn't exist.
Like a 5-year-old that just spits out the obvious that no adult would ever say.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Right.
You know what? We're going to take a break. Is that good? We're good for a moment here? Take
Yeah.
a little break and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. And I'm going to come back to Gib for a minute, Joell, but I've got plenty for you too. So as Nick was growing up in the house, how did you discipline Nick? How did you set rules with Nick?
The problem is, and depending upon the functionality of a kid, the worst thing that can happen, and I've seen this happen over and over and over again with tearful parents, is the autistic kid runs the house. That's what ends up happening. Everything is catered to them. They run completely wild, right? And then but punishment does not work.
It doesn't work.
It actually makes it 1,000 times worse. The whole ABA model is trying to pound a square peg into a round hole. Oh, wow, who knew, right? So what we ended up doing is I've described it as a tunnel, and this is I described to all the parents. The deeper you are in the tunnel, you take a tunnel, like pretend like you're in a tunnel and look through one eye, and the deeper you are in the tunnel with your hands, the smaller the outside world is. The closer you are to the edge of the tunnel, the bigger the world looks. So the way to deal with autistic kids, you are never, ever, ever, autism is tougher than you. You will never punish it, cajole it out of existence. You won't. You will be crushed before it's tougher than you. So what you do is you go to where that kid lives, somewhere in the tunnel of autism, and you go figure out what their language is. What is their currency? What are the things that are important to them? And you go, if they want to flap their hands, my son used to sit there and flap his hands and go, yee, like waving his arms around, the craziest thing.
You say he used to. He doesn't do that anymore.
No, not really, no. But you know how one of the things that we did to stop it? You go we constructed a playroom, like the Sunrise program. We've taken 6 classes back in Massachusetts for 7 weeks, right? What ends up happening is you join him in those behaviors. The teachers will say, no, grab his hands and make him stop. Well, that's only going to make it times 100. If he starts flapping his hands and going, ee, you flap your hands going, ee, and you know what happens? They stop.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just a question of joining behaviors, and then you slowly lead them out towards the light, lack of a better term. That's really that's what we decided to do by constructing a playroom, right, according to the spec, and then you have different kinds of trained therapists in there, basically all day long in 1 or 2 hour shifts, right? 2 hours is a long time. I try to think 90 minutes is about it. And you are just basically you're joining these behaviors. You are trying to figure out, because first thing you got to have is eye contact. If they don't want to make eye contact with you, you have a mirror on the wall. And they will look in the mirror because they always want to look at themselves. They will make eye contact with themselves, no problem. Flapping their hands, doing whatever. The fastest way that you can get that is you stand right behind them and you look into their eyes through the mirror as an intermediary, right?
Yeah.
And then pretty soon he would spin around and he would suddenly be looking right into my eyes. And you cheer like you have never cheered in your life. The 49ers just won the Super Bowl, that kind of cheering,
Yeah.
right? And then once you establish eye contact, now you got them, right? Okay, then we're going to go to physical contact. Some like it, some don't. So you just work on those building blocks. But the first way you got to do is you got to figure out a way to get them to look into your eyes to establish that human connection. So that was the basic, and those 4 things. And then once you get all that stuff down, then you can work on the friendship skills. But first thing you got to do is get them out of their box. And the first thing that happens is I'm looking into your eyes right now, you're looking into mine, because you and I understand each other. But nothing happens. That's why the ABA kids that are just behavior modification, you can teach them how to speak and sound, reasonably appropriate, but they're not really listening. They're just responding to a script, and they're never looking in your eyes. So that's the first most important thing, I would say, is that that's what we did. And it also, you don't have a whirling dervish running around the house upsetting the apple cart, because siblings of an autistic
brothers
kid,
and sisters, yeah,
holy cow!
right.
I mean, right, particularly when this kid, right, he's got the stepbrother who's a little older, and he's got the sister who's a little genius, right? So all of a sudden, it's not fair to the other 2 kids who get like no parental help, right? Because everything circles around the whirling dervish.
I want to come back to the brother-sister thing in a minute with Nick, but I want to go to Joell for a moment because I want to ask you, how do you set rules and regulations at the ranch? How do you handle all of the things that are going on? And, how do you keep them under control, I guess? And I don't want to sound like that's weird or something.
No.
But you have to keep order, correct? What do you do?
Like Gib said, most people with autism have a 6th sense of knowing whether or not you're being honest. If you're down, if you're in a grouchy mood, they know, no matter how well you think you're hiding it. So we really feel like we're in the business of rebuilding brains, and our understanding of the brains is that people can get into a regulated state if you can make them feel safe and if they can move. And so, but you can't just let someone, run around like a whirling dervish, like you said. So you have to create natural spaces where people can act out. When they're able to do that, they'll come back to you. To go back to the horse metaphor, we're all talking about this fight, flight, or fawn response, trauma response. And the best way to get a horse into a fight or flight state is restraint. And it's the same way with the people that we're serving. If they feel physically or emotionally restrained, you're not going to get the reaction that you want. So sometimes I feel like a little bit of a Disneyland dad, that I've created this kind of nirvana space where people can do things that they maybe aren't able to do. Because we find that when we allow behaviors to happen, that all behavior is communication, right? So flapping and squealing, there's something to that. And it turns out humming is actually very therapeutic in our bodies. Music, like Gib said, is such a beautiful regulator. And sometimes people are making those noises, those movements to drown out external sounds that we're not aware of. So getting people in an environment with as few sensory triggers as possible, and then creating space for them to move, ideally rhythmically, which is another reason that the horse comes in. If you can get someone who's dysregulated up on the horse, one, they can actually feel their heartbeat. A horse's heartbeat has an amazing resonance that whether or not we consciously feel it or not, and it's got a time signature that's very low. and I could go into all of that. Herd behaviors, right? So a horse eats grasses, dried grasses, which is not that many calories. And you saw their bodies. They have to support these big, beautiful, muscular bodies. So it's in the horse's best interest to conserve energy. So, and the only way for a horse to conserve energy is to make sure his entire herd is conserving energy. So a lead horse, a bossy horse, will actually downregulate the heart rates of everybody around because it's survival.
Wow.
So being around the horses downregulates so much. And to my point about being a Disneyland dad, we tend to, at Square Peg, lean into people who don't have other options recreationally because of behaviors. And we get to see a really sweet side of people all the time because of the environment we've created. And so we often forget, oh, this is the person that, punches people in the nose, or this is the person who's bashed out their own front teeth, or this is the person who, scratched their therapist across the face enough where it really hurt them. We see so few behaviors at the ranch because it's an idealized environment.
That's what this horse therapy is all about.
That's what this horse therapy is all about, really, in a nutshell. Which sounds idyllic, which sounds Pollyanna-ish.
Yes, it does.
But the proof is in the pudding, and I think
Yeah.
I think Gib will attest.
How many kids do you have at the ranch right now?
At this moment?
Yeah. Weekly or daily or
Yeah,
whatever
we
it is.
see about, at our Montero location, we have another location in Sonoma. At our Montero location, we see between 40 and 55 families a week.
Yeah. And are all of them 5 days a week, or some come just 3 days a
No.
week?
We have blended families where they can only come every other week. We have people like, Nick is there 5 days a week. So we've got over 100 families on a waiting list.
And their responsibilities are sort of ranch hand responsibilities, or what? I mean,
So
what does
Nick is
do
one
up
of our
there?
paid interns.
He is,
right? So he
yeah.
works for us. So back to your question that I didn't do a good job of answering, of what does his day look like?
Yeah.
He's there to work, and he's getting
He's
paid.
there to work, right.
He's getting paid. So again, creating that environment, that container where he feels safe, and he also feels like he can communicate what his needs are to people who are going to consider it. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to give him everything he wants,
Yep.
but at least we're going to have a conversation about it. But he has responsibilities, and again, we're in the business of rebuilding brains. And so being out, physically moving around the horses, doing some physically hard work, and then getting paid for it is really the magic sauce in our job training program.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to interrupt just for a second. So he's a paid intern. Do you have interns there that are not paid?
We have a few people that volunteer,
Yeah.
but we really, truly believe that if you're trying to help young adults with support needs that are going to have support needs throughout their life, showing them that you value their work is a game changer. And it's still, in some circumstances, legal to pay people with developmental disabilities in California less than minimum wage, which is amazing, because doesn't that just say you think someone is more or less human than somebody else?
Yeah.
So our interns are paid $20 an hour.
Wonderful.
We're trying to raise money to give them all a
How many
raise.
interns would you have right now?
Right now, we probably have 4 or
Yeah.
5, including one guy that does billing for us.
That's great.
One young woman who does a lot of gardening for us.
Yeah.
But, that basic group work together of, it's that Buddhist notion of, chop wood and carry water, that there is a physical element. It has to be done every day. It's not that it's thankless, it's sacred.
Are Nick's responsibilities pretty much repetitive each day?
For the most part, yeah. Nick thrives on routine and predictability. That's very good for him. However, there will come a day when Nick decides that he's bored and this is stupid, and we're going to throw a huge party, because that means he's ready for more.
There's the
more at the
elasticity.
ranch, but not moving on from the ranch. Is that what you're saying?
We'll
he
do
could
whatever's
stay
right
there?
for Nick. Yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna create a safe space for Nick as long as that works for Nick. Our goal is always self-advocacy. That is our North Star. So having Nick advocate for what his needs are is our ideal goal. And if he decides one day, this is stupid and I hate it here, we're gonna help him find what it is that
Okay.
yeah.
Mark, I wanted to circle back around
Yeah.
to one thing, how important environment is. I'm going to use an example. It's a little bit of a vector, but not really. Years ago, there was a classroom, and it was at Burlingame Intermediate School. And I walked in, and it was the old home ec room, and this class was out of control. They had Lori Taylor was the teacher, and this poor woman, she's killing herself.
But were they with special needs kids?
Yeah,
or
they're all
just-
special needs
Okay,
kids. They're all
got it.
special needs kids.
Got it.
And this thing is just, and but you've got violent, self-injurious, and nonverbal all the way to why are you in this class, right? This kind of thing. And the importance of environment is, Joell's 100% right, is hugely important. Sometimes it's little things. And I walked in there, I said, Lori, I said, this entire room here is completely, everything in here are fluorescent lights. And you know that fluorescent lights drive autistic people insane. Not all of them, but most of them, because you can't hear the buzz, but they can.
They can. Wow.
And she said, so I was on the board at the time, and I said, I'm going to try and experiment with you. She looked at me like I was nuts. She's a really smart gal. But I said, let's try this out. So I got the requisition forms, we did, and we pulled out all of those lights, and we put in non-buzzing, blue, daylight balanced lights. All of a sudden, because you look outside, all of a sudden the room is this beautiful buttery blue light coming down on it. And instantaneously, half of the behavioral issues went away because there isn't anything picking and buzzing at them all the time. You suddenly have this beautiful, like the soothing blue light with no buzzing that's the same as outside, and it had a calming effect you can't believe. Like being out there with the ranch with the horses. Sometimes it's just something that a neurotypical would be. You, for instance, would be, or Joell's a neurotypical. I'm probably not, but it's those little things. It's the environment. He's outside. He's communicating with horses. There's dirt under his feet. And then in a classroom situation, which is hard anyways for kids that don't have a great attention span, if you can just like turn all of the anxiety of the environment down or off, you'd be shocked at how quickly it was instantaneous. These kids, the behaviors changed, and everything just got dialed all the way down to chill. From amped up. But the amp up is because it's something picking at them all the time, and it was just something as simple as fluorescent lights.
So is that kind of standard now that there's no more fluorescent lights in classrooms that have autistic kids? Or
Most districts need somebody like me. They're not as,
Really?
I'm trained in cinematography, so it's
Yeah.
the first thing I notice, right? But
Yeah.
for the most of the time, they're not enlightened
But
enough.
that's true about the fluorescent light. They can hear it.
A lot of them can.
And it
It's the
sets them
buzzing
off.
drives them crazy, and it's the temperature of it too. It's kind of a puke green. Fluorescent
Yeah.
lights are kind of a puke green,
Yeah.
kind of the Kelvin scale, but you have
Yeah.
beautiful buttery blue, and all of a sudden, it's just like playing Mozart,
Yeah.
very, delicately and gently in the background. It just sort of,
I want to talk about some of the financial support that may or may not be out there, if you don't mind. You mentioned that you and your wife went to Massachusetts for several weeks. Is that correct?
We went back there 6 times, and then we
6
brought
times,
Nick back
okay.
there. Yeah.
What about, and I know that you can afford that, which is great. Whatever. What about the family that can't afford that? What about the family that's, day-to-day paycheck, like me, okay? What about those folks? What kind of support is out there for them? What do they do once they realize they have an autistic child? Where's the help?
It's basically is de minimis, and the worst problem that we have now is that these kids are run down the conveyor belt. through the school system, and then they turn, say, 18, and then they go into like a continuation program, lack of a better term. But the minute they turn 21/22 in that school year, the trap door opens and there is nothing left. And all there is they are literally, you're on your own, homie. There you go. And the day programs around here, the day in, day out day programs range from marginal to one of them that Nick was in for about 3 weeks. They actually were evicted by their landlord, didn't tell any of the parents, and the kids were stuck out on Cowan Road down the street from my office, where they tried to find a bus and then just took them to a park somewhere. I mean, it's just most of the day programs, and I'm picking on them a little bit. Once the trap door opens and they call it aged out of the system, there's Joell, and there's a few day programs, but a lot of them are just ways to suck money out of the taxpayers and just warehouse them, and that's basically what happens. So you got to fight for it, right? And you got to fight for any services that you get, and they make it almost impossible. And that's why there's attorneys who do nothing all day long but fight for services for kids who have aged out of the system. And even
Age out means 21.
Yeah, right. 21, 22 if it's in the school year. Right, and it's interesting, and that's not only that. That's just getting services while they are in the school district, because they have you have this. It's called an IEP, which is Individualized Education Program. That's what it is. And you sit down with the psychologists and the teachers and all these other people, and you figure out it's this long, ridiculous, just overly officious nonsense. It used to be 4 pages, now they're 40 pages. Little Jimmy will be able to respond appropriately to this question 80% of the time. Oh, check the box. Little Jimmy can talk now. It's just become a giant bureaucratic nightmare by which they can suck money out of the state and the county and provide de minimis help to these kids. They're not making the kids better. So that's why parents have to constantly advocate for their kid. And you have to constantly be on what's going on at the school. And you have to constantly be saying, okay, fine. It used to be only ABA. We don't pay for anything but ABA. That was the way it was. And when I got on the board, and then I represented Burlingame and Hillsborough to the county, I pitched a fit when I found out that the ABA provider, which is they basically take a kid in college and we're going to train you for 5 days and we're going to pay you $21 an hour to just basically train the kid like he's an animal, and they're going to charge the county and the state $40 an hour and pocket the difference. And at 1 year, between Burlingame and Hillsborough, mostly Burlingame, $950,000 of billable hours to basically just warehouse kids and how are you today? I'm fine. Here's your cookie. It was the craziest thing. So I was the one that flipped my lid. It's been years now, and say, okay, all of these other autism treatment modalities have got to be on the table and they have to be funded. Right, and so now there are other options, but the most important thing, education is power, knowledge is power for parents. You really got to take a deep dive into what's going to be best for this kid. And sometimes ABA is what they need. They don't know how to use a bathroom, the rudimentary rote things. ABA is pretty good for that, but once you get to the relationship parts of it, you really need to. The parents have to advocate, and they got to advocate hard, whatever their financial situation is.
So you were saying that they herd them into a classroom or something. They have they train somebody for 5 days.
No, it's one-on-one. They send somebody to your house when the kids are younger, and
Okay.
they, as an example, they train early intervention is the thing. What they will do is they will say, okay, and the therapist will be working with your kid, but he will be working on a treatment modality that makes the system appear successful while not having the kid isn't being successful. That's the problem. The problem is when you train a child like he's an animal, so he appears to be normal until you talk to him for 10 seconds, you go, oh, something's up here. That's just the school district or the government's way of saying, oh, look, we were successful with this. Give us more money. But really, the relationship therapies to really go to where they live in the tunnel, and really it takes 10 times longer. But at the end, A, B, C, D, and then you get an E, F, G, and as far down the alphabet as you're going to get, right? But where I have found that without the eye contact, physical contact, communication loops, and at the attention span, you're only going to go so far, and then you're just going to be a cement block after that. So I'm a huge proponent of relationship therapies to go and find out what the currency, the emotional, physical, visceral, like intellectual currency is with each kid, which is they're all different. And you gotta find out where that is, and they'll start to pay attention to you because they want to pay attention to you. But at the head end, they don't care about you. They're not looking into your eyes. They are monoliths, and there they are, and you got to figure out a way to get their attention because they don't care if they honestly don't care. You got to make them want to help be with you.
Yeah, it's the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, right? So if all of the motivation is if I do this, then the person on the other side of the table actually leaves me alone and gives me a cookie, that's extrinsic motivation. What Gib's talking about is intrinsic motivation, which we know from a neurobiological standpoint has much more lasting effects. That's getting someone motivated to do something for themselves. And that's what we're after. We're after that self-advocacy. Gib can't live forever, right? Nick is going to outlive him. We've got to do a strengths-based approach, which is clunkier at the beginning, which is harder, which does take more skill. The thing about ABA is that they honed it down so much that it's not a therapist coming to your house. It's a technician, and the person is being paid $16 an hour. They've had 60 hours worth of training, and they just do the Skittle routine. When we're talking relationship-based, when we're talking strengths-based, that's going to take more skill. The results are so much more lasting, and they're so much more dignified, right? Do you want to be talked at, or do you want to be spoken with? And when you build that trust, and when you help someone find their own intrinsic motivation, what is, like you said, Gib, what is that currency? That's meeting someone where they're at. And it seems like a small distinction. It's everything if we're talking about success for people. Success not being we check off something on a checklist. Success being somebody's able to live a life of their own choice.
Would that be like a parent's nightmare as your child starts to get older, 16, 17, 18, and the school thing is coming to an end? What happens next? I mean, you were fortunate enough to meet Joell, get Nick enrolled. He's an intern now, paid intern. That's a good story, right? That's a great story. That's like a happy ending. You know what I mean?
He loves it, and he has so much satisfaction out of this horse ranch. It's been like a godsend.
Yeah, but what about the parent that doesn't find the horse ranch? What happens? Where do they go? How do they get the help?
It's hard to do. First off, you have to find a day program to just keep them occupied.
And a day program, you've mentioned that, but when is the end of the day? 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the day?
No, that's usually day programs are usually they sometimes they're 6 hours, sometimes they're 4.
Yeah, right? So at the end of the day, they come back home.
Right. They come back home. That's basically what it is. And the thing that I find, as I said before, that we'll have whole groups of parents, whether we're teaching golf or whatever, the Special Olympics or whatever, the parents are all exhausted.
They all work probably for
absolutely, they're absolutely exhausted. Yeah. And what happens after I'm gone? And Joell's right. That's the first thing that comes into your head. And people you can do my estate planning and figure out, okay, everything gets over here. If something happens, Nick will be taken care of. But that's not always the case, because once you're thrown to the wolves,
it's not always the case, right?
No, absolutely not. And once you're thrown to the wolves and you are under government care, good luck, because it's going to be bare minimum, if that, and you're basically just going to be warehoused until you die. And no one is going to be interested. All these group homes that I've seen, and they're all run by the same cabal, and all they do is they just collect money and warehouse them, and nobody is ever making any progress. And you know something? It's just like you put 4 of them or 5 of them in the same house, and a lot of times it goes to the lowest common denominator, and before you know it, you got 4 zombies. I mean, I've looked at so many group homes. That's why these wonderful places that we've seen, we're going to try to create them with Joell, and we're buy our own facility and get some parents involved, and then try to do this ourselves, like some of the really, really good ones.
So would this be sort of a long-term support or living arrangement that
Yes.
you're trying to get for Nick, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned you would like to have your own place, right?
Yes.
For how many? Like how many? 4 or 5 kids or something, or
Well,
adults?
after some years of hitting our head against the wall, dealing with the local vendors, who are the ones that are providing the quote-unquote
Yeah.
helpers, which are just absolutely terrible. I mean, they're again, it's the same kind of
Now,
thing.
when you say vendor, what do you mean by that?
Well, you're a vendor to the county. You are like, I am for instance, the county, this person needs one-on-one care at all times. So, hi, I'm the vendor, and I'm the vendor of the county. I get vendorized, and what I do is I hire people, and I pay them $18.82 an hour. Funny that I know that
Right,
number,
right.
And I'm gonna go charge the county $38 an hour, and I'm going to keep and then I'm going to say that $20 is for administrative in quotes and for training. Well, I've never met one that's been trained for more than 2 days, and usually it's just zero. So what we're going to try to do is, there are some facilities and they're wildly expensive. And Nick was at one down in Santa Barbara. It's been around forever. It's $12,000 a month.
And that's
Try
out
that
of
on
the
for size.
that's out of the parent's pocket, or does the state
It's out of
fund
the
that?
Yeah, the state will fund part of it.
Yeah.
And then when I say part of it, I mean just a little
Yeah.
bit of it. So it's basically, and then if you get thrown to the wolves and you are really in the state's care at that point right now, you're basically getting minimum wage people who do not care, who are just there just to babysit.
And
your
that's what
kid,
you're
if
referring to
that.
as the technician? Is it not a therapist, but a technician?
Right. Yeah, and it's just so. But there are some facilities, Stevens Place up in Vancouver, Washington. I've been to a bunch of them that they do a wonderful, wonderful job. But the parents are involved. They all the money that gets put in gets turned around. The staff is there. The staff is paid a lot of money, and everybody is working hand in hand every single day to try to make their charges, the people that are living there, as good as they can be, to have them reach whatever their maximum potential is. And it may be this, it may be that, but they're not slowly but surely going down the drain, getting worse and worse until you just got a house full of zombies. I mean, which is basically what I've seen over and over and over again. It's frightening, honestly.
And it's bad math, right? A house full of zombies is expensive.
Yep.
It's really expensive. You know, people go backwards in their toileting and their personal care. That's hard to keep staff. I've just gotten back from Ireland, where a friend of mine is a special needs dad, and he built a $5 million equestrian program and residential program for people with really high support needs. And we walked through, and it was just spectacular. And he's 8 years in, and of course it's all funded by the government because it's a single-payer healthcare system. So he has to have metrics. He has to be able to show. And his daughter, whose care needs were such that she had to have 2 people around the clock with her, she now shares one caregiver for 2 people.
Is she an autistic child? Okay, wow.
And he throws his hands up and he looks around and he says, "It was easier for me to build this center than it was for me to get services for my daughter." And that's exactly what
Same
Gib's saying
thing
here.
here, man.
You
That's
build
why
your
we're
own
trying to do
ecosystem.
our own.
Yeah.
And I want to get Joell. We maybe get a horse ranch. I've been looking at properties, and we just get 4 or 5 like-minded families together, and we let it rip, and we make as close as we can to our own little Shangri-La. Because again, if you've got to, it's like a petri dish, but we got to make it a petri dish that a permanent one, but it is a petri dish, but one that is going to play to their strengths and is not going to have any aspect of it that is going to be agitating. It has to be a place where we're going to try to grow, not tamp down, right?
Yeah.
Grow is the most important thing, because if they quit growing, then they start stagnating. That ain't good,
Yeah.
right? Just like people, right?
Wow. Man, so, all right. Gib and Joell, you can jump in on this too. What advice would you give to a parent who just received an autism diagnosis about his child? I mean, what happens? What kind of advice would you offer?
After the freak out stage,
Yeah.
Okay, because the freak out stage that's the first one.
That'd be rough.
The first one's the freak out stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like, oh my God, my kid is never going to be. And of course, then, and then they give you a lot of false hope. Oh, well, it may be this, it may be that, it could be. Okay, first thing that you have to do is get a baseline to where. Now it depends on what age that they are diagnosed.
4 or 5, like Nick was, give or take. You know what I mean?
At
3, 4, 5.
that point, what I would do if it was me and all the parents that were revolving door, right? And this is like my wife and I used to lecture the whole San Francisco Unified School District one time, a whole auditorium of them, right? And tell everybody the same thing. You got to establish a baseline. Let's see where the kid is at, okay? And we're gonna take a treatment path, and we're gonna throw our heart, soul, blood, and guts into it as early as we can, right? In order to help them get to the next. You wait too long. Like, brains are like slow drying cement, and the later you get after it, the harder it is to rewire. And Joelle's right. You're rewiring brains. That's what you're doing. So the first thing, you got to get after it as early as you can, and you got to throw your heart, soul, blood, and guts into it. And I'm a great believer in relationship therapies. And everything has to be put on hold. Dad's going to have to be doing, if mom's going to run, like in our case, my wife she organized the program. That means I do all the cooking, I do all the this,
Right.
I do all the that, I pay all the bills, what have you, because it's full-time job. And then I got to tend to, Smarty Pants and the other one, and then you end up, so what ends up happening is everybody's got to pitch in, or it's going to get worse.
Who's going to steer the parent in the right direction, though? The pediatrician or a doctor, a family doctor? I mean, how do you know where to start? Where do you go?
Everybody's going to be different, Mark. Everybody's going to be
Google
different.
autism and
yeah, I mean, you're going to Google autism, and you're just going to keep grabbing at a bunch of brass rings. I mean, call me. I mean, honestly, to tell you that. I mean, that's what we ended up doing is they just kept sending people to me and me and her, and we would sit them down and just say, okay, look, you don't know where to start. Because the school district is going to say, well, here's where you start. You just go do this. Well, it's not just go do this. It's you literally have to reorganize your life in order, because if you wait too long or you let it go too long or you put your kid in the hands of people, I'm not going to say they don't have this best interest at heart, but to the resources that they have, are going to do the best that they can. You pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right?
Yeah.
So you're literally going to have to circle everything around. That means everybody in that household has got to be, in one way or another, you've got to make that, the progress of that kid, the focus of everything. And that means dad's going to have to work twice as hard, and mom's going to have to work twice as hard. But if you don't, the penalty for not doing that is, well, Joell, you know what the penalty is. And boy, now you got an out of control 16-year-old, right, who's self-injurious and incredibly unpredictable. And then once that happens, you want to see tearing a family apart. That's what it is. It's a lot easier to get them on the right track when they're little than it is to wait until way further down the line. And now you're trying to turn back the tape, and it don't work. I mean, it does, but it's like learning piano at the age of 4 versus learning it at 15. The 4-year-old is going to get a lot further 100% of the time. I'm married to a music teacher.
Right, interesting.
Yeah.
I would say find your tribe, right? Find people that have been through it. Find people that you share values with, because you're going to be spending a lot of time. And the loneliness is the toxic bit. That's what I see families go through with. They get so isolated, especially if there are behaviors that are embarrassing or physical or related to toileting and food. Find the people that can finish your sentences. Find the people. And luckily with the internet, those people can be across the world, and they can be accessible in different ways. But really find that tribe, and don't be, like Gib said, beholden to the advice of the experts at the school district, who are people who are dealing with limited resources, and they're trying to give it to the squeaky wheels. You got to find your tribe, and
Great advice.
and Gib, you've done it through golf. You've turned something that is a passion and music, things that are passionate for you. that have therapeutic effects, not just for Nick, but for you and for the family. And give yourself some credit, you know.
Well, you don't have a choice. I mean, you do, I guess you do have a choice,
Sure
but
you
you don't really have a choice at the end of the day, because a penalty for not. And she's exactly right. Find your own peeps. And the one piece of advice, the most important one, and this is the one, just like, tattoo this to your forehead, is nobody is a better expert about your kid than you.
Word.
Because your kid, your kid, and if it's your own, like I know what Nick's going to say or think, because I can just look at him, because I feel like my daughter and I don't even have to look at. Oh, we just look at each other. And it's 4 paragraphs, right? Yeah. The same kind of thing. Nobody is a better expert on your kid than you are. And if a teacher or a therapist or somebody tells you something, and it don't smell right or it don't feel right in your stomach, the answer is don't do it, because you are going to be right 99% of the time. I don't care how many PhDs they got. The fact of the matter is, you know what's best for that kid, because you live with that. You know how that kid's brain works, because he's part of you.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
My daughter's just me with a skirt. I mean, it's just, and your kid is, it's the same kind of thing. That's the one. You want one piece of advice? There's what it is. Do what feels right always, every time you come to a crossroads.
And forgive yourself. You're going to get it wrong a couple of times.
Yeah, you are.
Practice a lot of self-forgiveness.
1 or 2 more questions. I've got a Joe Rogan podcast going here, man. This is a long one.
Yes, it is.
1 or 2 more questions, right? Nick is 27. What's your hope for him for the future? I mean, obviously, I guess he could stay with Joell as long as Joell is in business or running the ranch and the lease is there and all that good stuff. But what if he doesn't want to do that anymore? What's your hope? And then as you move on in life yourself, right?
Well, I've got an objective. The objective is to create out of whole cloth a environment and a place where he can have peers and people to spend his life with, like, my best friend, right?
Yeah.
Right? Joined at the hip for 50-something years, right? I want him to have a group of people that he can share his life with.
Great.
That is my hope for him. Will he ever have a girlfriend? I don't know. The pregnancy thing freaks me out, to be honest with you. Plant potatoes, get potatoes, right? But we still. So that's a whole other podcast, the sexuality part. But I mean, but the reality is that my hope and dream for him is that we create a Shangri-La for him, to which he can not only thrive and find happiness, but also find human, day in, day out, close friendships and human interaction. Like, I have been blessed with, friends that are just and it's the joy of my life is my relationships. That is the thing to me. If I get to do one thing for Nick, that's what we're trying to do. And if we can do it in a house, in a farm, or however we do it, and whatever it is, we're just going to keep working at it, because, he's my kid, right?
Yeah, that's great.
And to not leave all of anything ever happens to me, to not dump it in my daughter's lap or my stepson's lap and say, okay, fine, here's Nick, knock yourself out. I mean, to really create something now that will take root and grow and blossom, and that it will just eventually, it's nothing that runs itself, but it's something that's going to have a longevity, not just for Nick, but for the people that he is going to grow old with, right?
Yeah.
Just like your old friends that you got, right? I mean, that's all you can hope for your kid, is that they have that they have human interactions, that they're not monolithic forever, that they begin to be part of something, whatever something is. I don't know.
Thank you. That was well said. Thank you. I got just one last question for you, Joell. And in my notes here, well, I have a few questions, but I'm just going to cut it to this one for time factor. Do you offer vocational training at your ranch? Any kind of vocational training? And I'm not even sure what that means. I thought I had written something down, but maybe I was getting confused.
Well, our job training program that Nick is a part of is funded through the Golden Gate Regional Center, which is how people in California with developmental disabilities have access to services. And like Gib said, there's a vendorization process that you're basically vetted to make sure that you are up to par to provide services. When you're vendored, you are paid a set rate. And there has been this whole process for the last 4 years, and of course COVID interrupted that, where they realized that they hadn't adjusted the rates for, I think, 18 years. So the rate we were getting paid was 18 years old, so they were doing this whole rate reorganization, and we were so excited that it was coming out. Well, guess what? We were reduced by 22% in our funding for our program.
When?
2 months ago.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Yeah. Inflation is what inflation is,
Yeah.
and we just got gut punched.
Jeez.
And we were told that we needed to have a plan to move our existing interns on. We had to just present them with the math and said, first off, 85% of people with autism are unemployed or underemployed. In the disability world, autism is the highest rate of unemployment of all disabilities, and employment is the most socially desirable thing for people with autism that are adults that are able to advocate for themselves. They say they want a job. So here we are providing a job. So we just went back to them and said, okay, well, here's what day service is costing you. And we're costing you a fraction of that. And we're giving someone a paycheck. Guess what? They're paying taxes, right? So we
Right.
have taken service users and turned them into service providers. Nick helps with sessions with little kids. He goes along on the trail. We need an extra person, to hold a horse if something goes sideways.
Yeah.
Nick's there. He's also getting a lot of good exercise. He's in better shape than he's ever been in. The vocational training thing, it's a sore spot with us right now because we certainly didn't expect to have a 22% reduction.
Yeah, man, that's...
So
what does that mean? Fundraising or something?
It means fundraising.
Yeah.
It means fundraising. And so my job I have an incredible staff. This is our 21st year. I took a sabbatical this last year to really rethink where I am professionally, and it's really all about fundraising right now.
Yeah.
Because our budget this year is about $1.6 million, and and we just lost about $20,000 in funding for the year.
Not easy to make a comeback on that.
Yeah, that was.
Well, there's one other aspect to this too, is that everybody forgets about. There's something called the Lanterman Act.
What is that again?
Lanterman Act. It's a 1977 piece of legislation that guarantees that special needs people who are citizens in good standing here in California, right, that they are entitled to this, and this. Black letter law, no discussion. And the Lanterman Act is continuously ignored at the State House. And it is ignored at the State House because their priorities are special needs people don't vote. Special needs people just don't appear here across the border. And here's all. So all these people that my soapbox, they come here and we are basically taking money away from legitimate special needs people. They are violating the Lanterman Act, which is absolute black letter law. They are violating it every single day, and those funds are being redirected to buy votes. So that's the other thing that everybody keeps forgetting about. Those are not responsibilities. Those are not squishy kind of, well, maybe we can do it, maybe we don't if you fight for it. That is black letter law that is day in and day out being violated by the state of California because the funds, they are intentionally underfunding everything and redirecting those money to the people who are paying off these politicians to suck money out of the Treasury the other way. So the other thing that's going to happen one of these days is all the parents got to get together, and we need to get some high-powered law firm, and we got to go to the State House and just say, here's the Lanterman Act. It's black letter law. It is never going to be overturned. And you're going to adhere to it from now on, period, end of conversation. And that's the only way that she's not going to have to bang in the tin cup constantly, people like me writing checks and all the parents and the whole rest of it, that's not right. In a situation like this, you're going to cut 22% out of something that is she's doing God's work.
Correct.
Over there. So that's the other thing that's kind of a sore spot, but that's a podcast for a different day.
I mentioned in the very beginning that you had a passion, okay?
Well, I do, baby.
For the kids and the adults, and I think that just came out. So it's time for shout-outs before we wrap it up. Joell, any shout-outs to family, friends, or colleagues?
I want to thank Nick for bringing us together because he's a connector.
Yeah.
He's a friend, he's a colleague, and I can't wait for the world to see what he's got to offer.
That's great. Gib?
My shout out, of course, would be to Joell because she's doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
But also the other shout out is all of my friends that have, all the parents that have a special needs kid. We're all, just understand, we're all having the same struggle. We're all hitting our heads against the same wall. And, people like me, we're here for you. And, you're not alone. I mean, we all just got to band together and just, and there's a lot of strength in numbers. If every family acts like an island, you're never going to maximize your kid's future.
Right.
Because everybody holds hands, right, in a collective and really, really and truly, right? You love your kid, you got to love that family's kid just like you love your own. And if we can all kind of put everything together here, I think we got a shot. I don't know if we can solve it, but we can sure make it a far sight better than it is right now. And people like Joell does not have a special needs kid. People who just decided that she wanted to do Christ's work, really.
And
what it is.
What a great thing.
Yeah, there
you
go.
What a great thing.
Right?
Yeah. I can't thank you guys enough. You set an all-time record for the Burlingame It's a Small Town podcast. I think we're an hour and 40 minutes, but it was well done, and I hope folks that listen to this enjoy it and get something out of it, and I certainly did. Thank you both for being here today.
All right, Mark.
Thank
Pleasure
you, Mark.
to be here.
I'd like to thank Joell Dunlap and Gib Papazian for being my guests today on a Burlingame It's a Small Town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. This was one of the most intense interviews I have done, and I hope you got out of it as much as I did. Again, autism strikes 1 out of every 31 children. As far as vaccines being a cause of autism, we decided to stay clear of such a controversial subject, and we suggest you refer to your physician. If you would like more information about the Square Peg Ranch and Foundation or would like to make a donation, please contact Joell Dunlap, Executive Director at joell@squarepegfoundation.org. That would be JOELLE at squarepegfoundation.org. Or if you would like more information about the challenges of being a parent of an autistic child, please contact Gib Papazian at gibpap@mac.com. That would be GIBPAP@mac.com. Thanks to my Minister of Podcasts, Mike Nagler, Executive Producer Shelby Lucchese, my Director of Marketing, Adrian Lucchese, and original music by Bray. This podcast was written, produced, and edited by Mark at the Mic and recorded on Wednesday, August 20th, 2025 at the Burlingame Public Library. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this podcast, and no part can be copied and replayed without the written consent of the Burlingame Historical Society. Be sure to look for my next episode when I sit down with Todd Lindstrom, the Viking Pied Piper of Burlingame. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.